Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Andrew von Eschenbach. When I first joined PCF in 1997, when it was called CapCure, this guy sitting in the front row here, Don Coffey, said, you gotta go out and meet this guy in Houston, Dr. von Eschenbach, who at the time was the #2 person running the MD Anderson Cancer Center. Since then, Andy has done amazing things for society, and in the true Jesuit sense, and as a guy who sent his daughter to Georgetown University, I understand the Jesuit sense very well. Andy has been a servant to all of us as the director of the National Cancer Institute and the commissioner of the FDA, and for a short period of time, he was doing both. So Andy is a friend to all of us, a continuous inspiration, and it's a real pleasure to introduce him here today to introduce Mike. Andy?
Thanks, Howard, and it's wonderful to be able to come back home to this group, and especially for the purpose of introducing our keynote speaker. Many of you perhaps know me, but may not appreciate the fact that I was born on October 30th, the night before Halloween, which is called Mischief Night. And my mother said it set the tone for my entire life. Our keynote speaker was born on the 4th of July. And those of you who know him would agree that, like celebrations and fireworks of the 4th of July, his life has been brilliant, explosive, and awe-inspiring. Brilliance was obvious when he graduated Phi Beta Kappa with honors from the University of California at Berkeley and then at Wharton Business School. And his explosiveness was apparent in his blowing up of conventional thinking in the world of finance and investments to really create a new world of awe-inspiring business and commercial opportunities. This is the Mike Milken that the world has known. But I'd like to introduce the Mike Milken I first met 20 years ago. After being diagnosed with metastatic prostate cancer, he was told that his brilliant, explosive, and inspiring life was soon to be over. But Michael was not ready for the fireworks to end or the celebration to be over. Along with his faithful family and his devoted physician, Skip Holden, he came to see us at MD Anderson. And at the same time, we happened to be hosting an international research symposium on prostate cancer. Mike registered anonymously for that conference. He sat quietly but furiously taking notes for 3 days. And at the end of those 3 days, a number of things happened. We clinicians offered him hope for a better prognosis. Scientists like Don Coffey, who was leading this effort, offered him the promise of progress that's manifested right here today in this prostate cancer symposium. And I personally had the privilege of beginning a 20-year friendship that I cherish. Most importantly, what happened was that brilliant, courageous, and awe-inspiring 4th of July man left with a commitment to set off more fireworks and to radically change the way we were going about the business of curing prostate cancer. Now, cancer was not a new cause for him because he and his Milken Family Foundation had been funding cancer research since the 1970s. But what was new was his commitment to blow up conventional thinking and find a better way not to just fund research, but a better way to do research, to create a new, more brilliant reality for patients. And over the past 20 years, the fireworks have never stopped. from establishing CapCure, now this Prostate Cancer Foundation, which transformed how we fund and accelerate research progress, to the Milken Institute and the Milken Global Conference that among its many contributions has made the case for the return on investment that comes from research and the saving of the life of a human being. To also now here in Washington, Faster Cures, which has been shaping political policy to guide our entire biomedical research enterprise. His contributions are innumerable, global, and they are enduring. And they are best defined by the cover story of Fortune magazine in 2004 that declared him the man who changed medicine. Now he's brought us together for 3 days in our nation's capital at a pivotal time in our nation's progress and pursuits with a new vision. A vision that biomedical research holds the key not only to eliminating unnecessary suffering and death due to cancer and other diseases, but also the key for our vitality, our longevity, and our prosperity in the 21st century. These are extraordinary times, but this is an extraordinary man. These are extraordinary times filled with old challenges, but also with unprecedented new opportunities. And during these discussions, I can assure you, he will be taking furious notes as he once again guides us to challenge conventional thinking and create a brilliant new world filled with awe-inspiring hope and a promise for longer and healthier lives. Ladies and gentlemen, let the fireworks and the celebration of science begin as you join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Mike Milken.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Andy, and I just want to tell you, I'm the happiest person to be able to be in the room with each of you tonight. And whether it was the call to Andy in 1993 or my walk around with Bill Nelson and Jonathan Simons, or that quiet evening in San Antonio with Don Coffey so many years ago. It's been a long journey, and I'm the happiest person to be able to take that journey with you over the last 20 years. And I called Howard Sewell the other day and just reminded him what an important person he's been in my life. You can dream big thoughts. You can wish that they occur and try to change the world. But you need a team of people that can make that happen. And that young Dr. Jonathan Simons and that almost as young Dr. Howard Sewell. It's been great to be on their team these years. Today, we are part of a 3-day event. That 3-day event really symbolizes our goals and the word imagine on your programs that you should have all received here. With 1,200 people that are going to join us over the next 3 days here in Washington, D.C. to try to change the future for the world. As Jay Schnitzer, director of DARPA, who's going to make a presentation for us tonight, pointed out, their goal at DARPA is not to interact with the future. Their goal is not to respond to the future. Their goal is to create the future. And in many ways, each of your responsibilities and activities have served to create that future, a better future for every single person on the planet. And the organization that we sit here today is the model organization for all disease-specific organizations worldwide. In many ways, the model for the NIH, NCI, and other organizations as a model of change, exhibited by the leadership under Dr. Simons and Dr. Sewell and so many. And of course, I've had the humanity of Dr. Holden for that journey along the way, which has been a tremendous friendship and support to me. If we want to look back at 1995, the first ever cancer summit here in Washington, D.C. It was a small group of people on relative terms, 300 to 400, but it really changed the world of science at that time. And I remember with Dr. Coffey, when I called him and told him we're actually going to go see Bob Dole. You know, he didn't think this dynamic professor from Hopkins that Senator Dole, who was running for President of the United States, wanted to listen to the ideas of Don Coffey. And Senator Dole was, and it started a relationship that has lasted many years. We also put up that day the 10 points for the war on cancer. And we can reflect on those when we have more time another day, but how universal those might be today, 17 years later, to internationalize that war, not just U.S., to increase investment, to recruit the best and brightest. The largest group of young investigators in the world is the PCF Young Investigators, and it's great to see you sitting in the front row there, Lorelei. Coordinate worldwide cancer resources. Accelerate technology transfers. Push the technology envelope. Create a world library of organic chemicals, and some of you remember we invested with laboratories in Boston to show we could sequence 40 or 50,000. We could sequence 40 to 50,000 different lines against one cancer line that we had, compounds to see if they would work. Accelerate approval of new drugs. We've all seen in 99 days a drug related to prostate cancer has been approved. And get product to market faster. Yes, there's a product today and it was approved. Bristol Myers is with us. And this is Jim Allison and others that have worked on that. But Jim Allison was one of our young investigators in 1995, so it has been a long journey till then. And mobilize patients and families. By 98, we were very focused in mobilizing those patients and families when we had 500,000 people here in Washington and around the country emphasizing the importance of science at this point in time and the enormous efforts that were going to be required for us to double the NIH budget, to double the NCI budget, to increase the National Science Foundation. And during this period of time, we've now had a $200 billion incremental funding since that date at those agencies. For 17 years, I've put out that the 21st century is going to be the century of worldwide competition for human capital. And if we're going to succeed and accelerate, it's a question of getting the best and brightest, which you make up, in the room, focused on these issues. And when I met the current head of the Prostate Cancer Foundation that day at Johns Hopkins, and people were telling him it was career suicide to go in this field of little funding, I told him actually it wasn't, and he had picked the right area, and we're going to fund, starting tomorrow, at the $25 million level. After I went to see Howard Scher in Memorial Sloan Kettering to find out whether there was a solution for my own prostate cancer, since he only needed to biopsy my lymph nodes. They were so big we didn't need to go anyplace else. Economics, NIH, change, young investigators, opportunity for people. The president of Caltech, who will be with you, pointed out that they've received more hits from the recent lander on Mars than they have in the history of Caltech. Success from almost every country in the world who want to know about this rover moving around Mars, how did it get there, etc. Success brings enormous interest of young people. On the other hand, if there's no financing and no opportunity, and today almost 20% of all PhDs in chemistry are unemployed in America today. And so we have to reaffirm the country's commitment to the young scientists who think differently. Average age of a PCF young investigator, the last 131 years of age. Pretty late to start thinking about those things, as I've, over the years, put up these slides letting you know how young Newton was and everyone else in their 20s when they made these discoveries. And what better time to think of new ideas than in your 20s? A picture of one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable portfolio in the world is of these 90 to 100 young investigators who on average have spent half their life since high school focusing on science and thinking about how we can solve problems differently and whether we should be going from A to D, not A to B, from that standpoint. There are 10 things I'd like to talk to you about today quickly as it relates to this 3-day event, the Celebration of Science, the celebration of the contributions of bioscience, bioscientists, for most of you, of your life work. First, we have to validate the careers you've chosen. Why you've gone into this career, what's the focus of this career, and that this is made the major contribution to the world, not just to the United States, but to the world. And that validation needs to underline the opportunities that have. Next, promote partnerships and collaboration. There's no better organization in the world than the Prostate Cancer Foundation that can talk about that. Those therapy consortiums, tissue banks, gene and family consortiums, nutrition programs, early days with Andy Grove to try to make it easier for Chris Logothetis to talk to Howard Scherer than for Chris to talk to someone on another floor of MD Anderson in communications. Third, make the economic case for the bioscience investment. What is the rate of return that the American people have received on this incremental $200 billion over the last 14 years? What do we know? What we do know is that more than 50% of economic growth has come from this area. And the other thing we know for sure is that the health of nations is far more important than the wealth of nations. And we know that wealth follows health from that standpoint. It's hard to believe, but as I wrote in the Wall Street Journal today, a little more than 50 years ago, life expectancy in Eastern Asia was 39 years of age. Not 1900, but in 1960. Today, as it approaches 70, if anyone would have told you that life expectancy in East Asia was going to go from 39 to 70, you would have known it had been a phenomenal place as an investor to invest. As life expectancy expands, investments in the future expand. Knowledge passes from one generation, and economic growth and job opportunities follow. NIH funding. For every dollar in NIH funding that occurs, things happen. Starting with 350,000 jobs directly. Pharma and biotech, 580,000 jobs. And the other thing we want to point out is if we think about the results, I spent this morning with Elias Zerhouni, former head of the National Institute of Health, who you'll get a chance to visit with, and looking at what was this investment we made in AIDS. I would step back and say to you, if you ask me what is responsible for the economic growth, a substantial contributor of South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa, it is American bioscience, Japanese bioscience, European bioscience. And if we look at AIDS, as Elias pointed out, the majority of all the hospital beds in America would be filled with HIV-positive patients today at a cost of $1.4 trillion had things grown the way they were going in the 80s. $10 billion was invested by the American people. It has allowed South Asia to flourish. It has allowed sub-Saharan Africa to flourish. It has changed the course of history. And during the next few days, you will meet the Berliner, the first human being on planet Earth who has had AIDS eliminated from his body, requires no additional treatment. And today we'll be filming, for you to see a little later, Magic Johnson, who more than 20 years ago announced what many people thought was a death sentence, who's now taken on the risk of being one of the owners of the LA Dodgers. Fourth, show how technology can change the course of history and actually reduce healthcare costs, not increases healthcare costs. With many of you over the years, we've talked about the 4 fundamental changes that have occurred: cost, speed, storage, and access. Cost of communications going down well over 99%. Speed increasing dramatically. Storage costs moving where it costs today 1/2 millionth of what it used to cost in data storage in your iPad 3. There is no reason why we can't substantially reduce this cost. And the ability to communicate to any patient, launch crowdsourcing, create pull philanthropy exists when we now recognize that there's actually more mobile devices on the planet than human beings. 5, demonstrate results from the investment in the human genome. What was this unbelievable investment that was signed into law by President Bush and supported by Barbara Bush, President number 41 in America, who will be delivering a message to us tomorrow night? What did this investment show? Well, a $3 billion investment cost that took 13 years is now being driven to $1,000. And one of the presenters tomorrow at the NIH is the individual who is shipping machines to you at this month that will drive the cost of sequencing a human genome to $1,000 and take 2 hours. We can only imagine what the ability and what the opportunities are in front of us today to actually treat an individual rather than treat a disease. To date, more than 290 genes that are related to cancer have been discovered. USDA has weighed in on 30 of those. And Saturday night, we're going to get a chance to see the most unusual opportunity. Starting with Jim Watson, going to Francis Collins, decoding the human genome, going to academic research centers, support by government, and ending in patients who will be able to lead normal lives because of the discovery of the concept of DNA and the human genome. It took a long journey, but instead of being non-functional individuals with short lifespans, today many people have the promise of leading a normal life by just taking a simple pill. 6, identify benefits of bioscience in other areas. Your work in the bioscience and investment in bioscience spans far more than just the health of an individual. On Sunday, Stephen Chu will lead a group in this area. Stephen Chu, Nobel Prize winner, currently Secretary of Energy, Eric Langner, and others. Okay. We'll look at these issues. Imagine what we would have done had we focused on this a long time ago. Today in energy and the cost, I've spoken over the years with you of, had we addressed energy in the United States effectively and become energy independent 10 to 20 years ago, what a different world it would be. How many of our best and brightest would not have lost their lives or limbs fighting around the world? What are these sources of alternative energy? We look at them, we hear them every day. Okay, and whether it's hydropower or geothermal or tidal waves or oil shale or natural gas, these are not new. In 1938, Fortune magazine listed these as alternative energy sources and the opportunity to use bioscience to interact with them. They looked at that natural gas car a little differently, and this is what they thought it should look like in 1938. But it has changed the world today. Imagine what it would have done had we changed the world decades ago. And today, because of technology, the United States now has the most amount of reserves of any country in the world. Next, 7. Illustrate the benefits of bioscience worldwide and throughout the United States. 83% of the money that the NIH spends goes to 300,000 research personnel at over 3,000 universities, worldwide medical schools, etc., in every state and throughout the world. That money that the American people are investing is not just being spent in Maryland or here in D.C. It's throughout the world, and a very difficult map here, but it basically shows you the per capita expenditure by state of the NIH. As we talk about the potential of reducing funding to the NIH in the United States, we're not talking about issues in Maryland. We're talking about issues throughout the world. And these benefits, as I've said, are far more prevalent in Botswana, whose economy has grown faster than any other economy in the world, due to the fact that AIDS has no longer become a death sentence. 8. Honor the role of the patient. One of our own at the Prostate Cancer Foundation story we're going to focus on Saturday night. The OMB and other analysis, when they analyze what is the benefits of our work in bioscience, only focus on the cost. We're going to look at an individual who, like millions of others, has participated in clinical trials over the years, in this case, 5. We're going to look at an individual since he was diagnosed with what appeared to be a life-ending cancer, has served the United States in leadership in Afghanistan, Iraq, served as Assistant Secretary of Defense, been in charge of the health of everyone in the military, helped turn around and strengthen Walter Reed, and at the same time found 2 companies that today employ thousands of people. The benefits, the income to our society from his benefits of extended life are almost impossible to calculate. It was not the cost of his treatments. It was the benefit of his treatments for society. And we're going to recognize, as we will tonight, many of the heroes, whether they be in the military or not, who have given back, many who knew that that clinical trial might not help them, but in their service to their fellow man, knew it might help someone else. And finally, we're very focused here on the emphasis of personal responsibility. It was 1994, 95 in Santa Barbara that at our PCF retreat, we broached the idea that maybe we should have someone, in this case Dr. David Heber, who's with us, whose work is in the field of nutrition, and there might be some correlation between your personal health, weight, and what you eat and your outcome. There was great resistance to this idea, even in a revolutionary organization that is today called the Prostate Cancer Foundation. And so, to be polite to the group, we agreed that Dave could only speak at lunch. Forget that he was an MD, PhD. Nutrition and what you ate was not considered serious. And in the early 1980s, into the early 1990s, The most disliked group after the cigarette manufacturers at the National Cancer Institute were those that were trying to tell you there was some relationship between what you ate and how you lived your life and your health. More than any organization, we have pointed out that America was a totally different country in 1991, with very few parts of our country dealing with obesity and the challenges of obesity, mainly centered in Louisiana, Mississippi, West Virginia, and Michigan, with 3 of those states not having a large population. We've seen the transformation of America over the last 20 years. And in spite of the work of Bill Nelson, the afterword by Don Coffey, and a nutrition cookbook, we have not yet convinced the American public of their own responsibility in this effort here, of our efforts in bioscience, and the cost of just the change in weight, as was documented in a report on an unhealthy America by Ross Duvall at the Milken Institute, has cost the country $1 trillion a year. Funding for the NIH, funding for your programs, many things have been diverted due just to the weight change in America. 10th, share the relationship and stress it between prevention and wellness, care and treatment, and cure. We pointed out at the very beginning that if we're going to get people to invest in this area, we can't all invest in treatment and care. Today, well over 90% of all the money invested is not in wellness and prevention and is not in research and cure. Unfortunately, today, the valuations in financial markets because of it are substantially higher if you're making Kleenex or cosmetics or carbonated drinks or chips than if you're working in the field of bioscience today. And your company, if we look at just the largest companies in the world, your company will have a valuation 50% higher if you're making potato chips or carbonated drinks or lipstick than if you're working on trying to eliminate diseases as a cause of death. We've relied more and more on the focus of philanthropy. It still makes up only 3%, but it's that venture philanthropy, and we hope an explosion of support for young scientists here over the next few years that will encourage them to stay in the field. As one of the founders of the Faster Cures organization pointed out, Jerry Levy, it's not only a whole cadre of young, enthusiastic scientists' careers at jeopardy if NIH funding does not improve, but discoveries that have the potential to improve the lives of all Americans. As we think about these 3 different areas, it's ultimately research leading to cures that solves the problem. But today, it's that substantial increase in cost of care and treatment due to lack of prevention and wellness that is draining and preventing substantial increases in research funds today. We have to step back and just figure out the journey that we've traveled. I know my own journey, just the sheer fact I'm being with you today. It didn't look that way when I first visited Dr. Holden's office almost 20 years ago. We can think of the diseases that have been controlled in the 20th century. The major cause of death in the United States, the 3 major causes of death, TB, pneumonia, dysentery, no longer among the major causes of death in America. And we cannot thank you enough. We can never thank you enough for your decisions to be made as to choosing this bioscience, clinical, translational, and basic as your career. And we can never forget that in America, at the start of the 20th century, one in 5 Americans lost their life by the age of 5. And whether you were the President of the United States or Mr. Frick, one of the wealthiest men in the country, it didn't make any difference. Today, before we reach that number, you get to be about 63. in 100 years, moving from 5 to 63 in 100 years, what more testimony do we have to make to the advantages of bioscience? In closing, this is the century of bioscience. In every facet of our lives, in everything we do, in the solution to every intractable problem. And we have renewed hope and energy because of this new team of young investigators that's with us. And we are sure, with 50 of the United States leaders with us for the next few days after they meet you, that they will see the light. And later today, we are meeting with the speakers from eight G8 countries, equivalent of our Speaker of the House, speaker from UK, France, European Community, Germany, Italy, Russia, Japan, and Canada are here to listen to our views and the potential in the bioscience. In closing, I'm honored to be with you. I look forward to our vacation in 5 years when we've eliminated a number of diseases as a cause of death due to your work. Thank you very much.